success. The world tells you it's about money, fame, power, and achievements. But what if I told you that God's definition of success looks completely different, and yet it leads to the deepest joy, unshakable peace, and a legacy that lasts for eternity? In this video, we're going to uncover God's true formula for success, and I promise, it's not what you think. Stick around, because the fourth key will challenge your entire mindset. The world we live in constantly tells us that success is about outcomes. It's about the numbers you produce, the applause you get, the recognition you receive. Whether it's money in the bank, followers on social media, or titles behind your name, culture has drilled into our minds that results are everything. But God sees it differently. In His kingdom, success is not measured by the end result, but by obedience. The greatest victories in God's eyes are often hidden in quiet faithfulness, in saying "Ayes" to His voice when no one else understands, in staying the course even when the finish line is invisible. Obedience is the real proof of trust. It is the tangible expression of faith. To obey God means to surrender your understanding and your desire for control. It means doing what He asks, even when it doesn't seem logical or rewarding. Take Abraham, for example. God told him to leave everything familiar and go to a land he didn't know. There were no details, no guarantees. All Abraham had was a command and a promise. He obeyed without knowing the outcome. That's what made him successful in God's eyes. We must unlearn the world's obsession with outcomes. Yes, goals are important, and excellence is honorable. But the heart of God is always after the question, did you obey? Did you follow what I asked you to do, regardless of what came from it? Noah spent years building a massive ark on dry land. There was no rain. People laughed. He was ridiculed. But he wasn't building the ark to gain popularity or profit. He was building it because God said so. And that's where success begins. The world might call it foolish, but heaven calls it faith. Real obedience is costly. It will require you to go against trends, comfort, and even your own plans. It might not make sense to others. But the ones who change history in God's eyes are the ones who choose obedience over applause. Obedience is not about convenience. It's about trust. God's instructions will often come without the full picture, because He's not just leading you. He's shaping you. Every time you obey without seeing results, your faith is refined. Every time you say, "Yes," without knowing how, your trust deepens. God is more concerned with your heart than your platform. He wants relationship, not just performance. Many people chase fruit while ignoring the root, but God's way is different. He's more impressed with the man or woman who is quietly obedient than the one who produces results through disobedience. It is possible to build a tower of success that reaches the skies. But if it's not built on obedience to God's voice, it will crumble under the weight of pride. Sometimes, obedience will look like letting go of something good in order to pursue something God calls great. Other times, it will mean staying in a difficult place, not because it's easy, but because God hasn't told you to move. It might mean starting something with no promise of results, simply because He whispered it to your spirit. But here's the beautiful truth. God is always faithful to honor obedience. Even if the results don't come quickly, even if no one notices, heaven sees. God rewards obedience in ways the world cannot. Peace that passes understanding. Joy that's not tied to circumstances. A life that bears fruit in due season. Success, according to God, is not a finish line you cross. It's a path you walk daily. It's a decision to trust Him moment by moment, step by step. It's saying is to His word, even when your feelings say no. And as you obey, you begin to experience a different kind of success. One that doesn't fade, one that builds your soul and impacts eternity. So stop chasing outcomes. Start pursuing obedience. Because when you obey God, you are already successful in the only eyes that matter. Let the world measure by what it sees, but let your heart measure success by how faithfully you've followed the one who called you. In the end, the words we long to hear are not, "Well done, successful entrepreneur," or "Well done, best-selling author." No. The greatest words ever spoken will be, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That is the success that never dies. In a culture obsessed with comfort, pleasure, and instant gratification, the idea that God prioritizes character over comfort seems completely upside down. Yet, it is one of the foundational truths of God's formula for success. He is far more concerned with who you are becoming than what you are achieving. To God, the condition of your heart carries far more weight than your status, wealth, or outward appearance. While the world applauds the rise of external success, heaven watches the internal development of the soul. God often allows discomfort, trials, and suffering not to harm you, but to refine you. Because success in God's eyes requires a pure, humble, and resilient heart that can carry His purposes without being destroyed by pride or corrupted by temptation. The story of Joseph is a powerful example of this truth. As a young man, he had dreams of greatness, leadership, and favor. But before he could be trusted with influence, God had to shape his character through adversity. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison, Joseph experienced a long season of discomfort and injustice. Yet, during that time, God was molding his integrity, patience, humility, and faith. The pit and the prison were not punishments, they were preparation. They stripped Joseph of self, reliance, and taught him to depend entirely on God. When the time finally came for him to step into leadership, he had the character to carry the responsibility. If Joseph had been promoted prematurely, he would not have had the maturity to sustain it. That's why God delays some blessings, because He loves you too much to give you something that will destroy you. Character is forged in fire. It's built in the hidden places where no one is watching. It's shaped through the daily choices, to be honest when lying would be easier, to love when bitterness seems justified, to forgive when revenge feels deserved. God uses difficulty as a chisel to remove pride, arrogance, selfishness, and fear. And even though it hurts, the outcome is something priceless, a heart that reflects His nature. Comfort rarely changes us. In fact, it often makes us complacent. But trials awaken dependence on God. They expose our weaknesses and teach us to lean on His strength. They produce perseverance, which in turn builds spiritual maturity. The discomfort we run from is often the very thing God uses to prepare us for the calling we long for. Too often, people interpret hardship as a sign that something is wrong, when in fact, it may be a sign that God is doing something right. If your character is being tested, refined, and stretched, take heart. God is at work. Success without character is dangerous. It leads to moral failure, spiritual pride, and eventual collapse. But when your character is strong, your success becomes sustainable and impactful. God's goal is not just to elevate you, but to purify you. He's not trying to make your life easy. He's trying to make your life holy. That doesn't mean He delights in your pain. On the contrary, He walks with you through it, offering strength, comfort, and wisdom. But he will not remove the process, because he knows what's on the other side. The greatest men and women of God all went through seasons of breaking before they were publicly used. David was anointed king as a boy, but spent years running for his life before taking the throne. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before leading Israel. Jesus himself spent 40 days in the wilderness, tempted and tested, before beginning his ministry. All of them were shaped by discomfort and made ready through struggle. Their character was not optional, it was essential. And the same is true for you. If you want to live a life that pleases God and impacts eternity, then embrace the process of becoming, not just arriving. Don't despise the season you're in just because it's hard. God may be using it to deepen your roots, strengthen your faith, and prepare you for something you're not yet ready to handle. Real success begins when you stop asking God to make your life easier and start asking Him to make you stronger. When you value transformation over convenience, growth over ease, and purpose over pleasure, you align yourself with the heart of God. The world may not understand your journey, but heaven will celebrate your endurance. Because when you stand before God, He won't measure your life by how comfortable it was, but by how faithful you were in the midst of discomfort. He will see the integrity forged in private battles, the humility shaped by setbacks, the faith refined by fire. And that is the kind of success that echoes into eternity. The world celebrates self-promotion, self-achievement, and self-glorification. Success, according to modern standards, is defined by how far you can climb, how many people serve your interests, and how much recognition you receive. But God's formula for success is radically different. In His kingdom, the greatest among you is the one who serves. God's path to promotion is through humility, not pride. It is not about being seen, but about seeing others. Service over self is not just a nice idea. It is the heartbeat of heaven. The Son of God Himself did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give His life as a ransom for many. That alone should reshape how we define success. True greatness in the eyes of God is rooted in how well you love, how deeply you care, and how willingly you sacrifice for others. The higher your calling, the lower you must bow. Jesus gave the ultimate model when He washed the feet of His disciples, including the one who would betray Him. In a culture where status determined worth, Jesus shattered the system by becoming the lowest servant in the room. This was not just a gesture. It was a declaration of what divine success looks like. It's not about being on top, but being willing to go to the bottom to lift others up. If you want to follow God's definition of success, you must begin by dying to self-centered ambition. The question is no longer, how can I be served? But, how can I serve? That mindset doesn't come naturally. It's formed by surrender, shaped by God's Spirit, and practiced daily through small, often unnoticed acts of love and compassion. In a world of personal branding and self-marketing, God invites you to lose yourself in the mission of serving others. He isn't impressed with how many people know your name. He's looking at how many people were touched by your kindness, your generosity, your presence. Serving others doesn't always mean grand gestures. Sometimes it's listening when someone is hurting, helping when no one else will, or encouraging when someone feels forgotten. Every act of service, no matter how small, carries eternal weight. God sees what others overlook. When you serve with a pure heart, you step into a level of influence and impact that fame can never replicate. Selfishness limits you, but service multiplies you. When you live only for yourself, your world becomes small narrow, and shallow. But when you live to serve, your life expands beyond what you can imagine. You become part of something bigger than you. God begins to trust you with more, because He knows you won't hoard the blessing. You'll use it to bless others. Success is not in how much you keep, but in how much you give. The greatest leaders in God's kingdom are servant-hearted. They don't demand attention, they command respect through love. They don't seek to be first, they're willing to be last. They don't build empires for themselves, they build lives for others. Many people chase platforms, but God is building servants. He's looking for hearts that are willing to be used, even if they're never praised. If your motive is to glorify yourself, you may gain the world, but lose your soul. But if your motive is to serve faithfully, even without recognition, you gain favor with God. Serving others is not a step down. It's a step into your true calling. You were not created to merely exist for yourself. You were designed to be a vessel, pouring out love, grace, and encouragement to everyone you encounter. Let go of the need to be seen and embrace the joy of making others feel seen. Let go of the obsession with being celebrated and embrace the fulfillment of celebrating others. Every time you serve someone, you reflect the heart of God. Every time you choose someone else's need over your own comfort, you align with heaven's definition of greatness. In the end, success is not about how high you climbed, but how deeply you loved. It's not about the throne you sat on, but the towel you picked up. Live a life of service, and you will live a life that matters not just in this world, but in eternity. Because the only legacy that lasts is the one built through love, sacrifice, and service.